3 of you, but I kind of inspired some other folks to come. And then I have questions that folks have sent me from some of their questions that weren't able to join us. So are you okay if we get started and hit record? So welcome everyone to our January Living Well Before and After Transplant program. My name is Cindy Huber and I'm the CEO of the National Kidney Foundation of Wisconsin. And we're excited that all of you are here and grateful to our partners at the American Liver Foundation, and you'll meet Chad in a moment, who have offered us a great meeting facility and are great partners in terms of our topics and programs for this winter and spring. So I thought before we get started tonight, if you're comfortable, and just so other folks that might be listening to this recording after tonight, and because they weren't able to join us, if you're comfortable just saying your first name and if you have a connection to Transplant right now. But first, maybe I'll turn it over to Chad for him to introduce himself.
All right, good evening. My name is Chad Dunning. I'm the Community Events Coordinator for the Upper Midwest Division of the American Liver Foundation. We cover 5 states. We cover Iowa, Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Wisconsin. I'm pretty much involved in putting together all the events, fundraising-wise, solicitation-wise, and getting all the events taken care of. I am a transplant recipient, 4 years liver post, so.
Great.
I'm Sue. I am a kidney recipient. I got it from my brother almost 30 years ago next month, or 30 years next month. So we're good.
I'm Sarah, her daughter.
One of my support people.
I'm John Hacker. I'm a volunteer at the Kidney Foundation, and I'm a heart transplant, 11 years and 8 months and 2 weeks out.
I'm Merle Steelman. I'm a volunteer with the Kidney Foundation as well, and I'm a kidney transplant recipient a little over 9 years now.
I'm Jack. I had a heart transplant in 2009 in Madison. So coming up on 10 years next summer.
And my name is J.D. Whittick. I had a lung transplant 18 months ago at Freighter.
I'm Susan, and I'm the support person.
Good evening. I'm Lucy Bailey, and I am a recipient. I'm a double transplant, heart and kidney, and I'm 4-year post, and it was performed at Freighter Hospital.
Great. Well, tonight I tried to organize us in terms of maybe sharing first, before we just jump into the topic of some of the challenges and some of the things you're wondering about in terms of travel and transplant. I thought it might be interesting for folks to just recall, and I'm going to kind of look at Jack, Merle, and John first, and then other people.
Hi, where are you?
Come on in, please.
Oh, I'm like a little band around.
And we've just had a few people join us. We are recording, so if you're, would you like us to pull up a chair, or would you like to just sit? There we go.
Get you closer to the mic.
Yeah, we are recording because there are some people that haven't been able to join us, so we're recording tonight. So if you're comfortable, just first name and if you're a transplant recipient or any connection to transplant. And you are?
Gary.
And?
Heart transplant.
And
about 3 years
3 months ago, heart transplant, Gary, and you are?
Well, this is Vitaly. I had the transplant back in 2009. I had a kidney transplant. Unfortunately, at that time, I was lucky. My wife, she was a match. So I didn't have to run dialysis or anything like that, you know. So So I was very lucky.
Good.
So I feel good on today and here. Oh,
Great. And
Some water and snacks.
Yeah. Yep.
yeah.
okay, so I'm going to, this will be kind of an open discussion, but then I might default to some of the folks that I've recruited ahead of time. But maybe just starting with the three of you, if kind of recalling before the transplant in terms of like who you were in terms of travel. And Jack, I don't know if I can pick on you first, but just kind of way before transplant, maybe way before you got sick. Can you just talk a little bit about, did you travel for either work or pleasure, just kind of to get a context, because I think then after transplant, we might think differently. But what was your travel life like before?
I never really traveled for work per se. There may have been a few work-related trips, but I traveled a lot from the time I was first out of college. Right after that, I lived in London for quite a while, so I was back and forth a lot. So from that period on, I always traveled a lot, domestically and internationally.
Okay, and how about you, Merle, before transplant, maybe before you got ill?
My family's fairly far-flung across the U.S., so I've done an awful lot of travel domestically for most of my life, checking in on these relatives or those relatives or whoever. Welcome.
Hi. Hi.
And I also traveled a fair amount internationally for business. And before my transplant. When I got ill and was on dialysis, I was encouraged heavily to travel, but the logistics just about killed me, right? So I never actually pulled off any of the trips before my transplant.
Okay, and we're recording, so
So keep it
again,
clean.
for those listening to the recording, I apologize, but our room got changed for our program tonight, so we're squished into a smaller space. So I apologize if you're listening to a few things. So John, how about you before transplant? What kind of travel guy were you?
Very limited for pleasure or personal. So I really didn't travel much at all until my kids got old enough that they moved away from me. And so I have a daughter who lives in Virginia, and a daughter who lives in New York City, and a son who used to live in Portland, Oregon. So I would visit them like once a year maybe, but not a whole lot. And I used to have a job that I would go to like meetings or conferences around the country maybe once or twice a year, but nothing really extensive there either. I mean, it wasn't like a once a month or anything like that. It was, once a year I would go and visit some architects out of town or something like that.
Okay, how about anybody else that's a transplant recipient, kind of before transplant? Just Sue?
I've been camping since I was 6 months, and that's basically all we do. Started in a tent, went to a pop-up, and now we're in a trailer.
So before. How about you, Chad?
I would say not that much of traveling, maybe just a little bit to maybe Orlando, but that's about it.
Anybody else before transplant, before you got sick? I just want to set the context. Yeah.
I did quite a bit of traveling beforehand. We were stationed in Hawaii for 3 years, and then stationed in 4 national forests. So we moved a little bit, and I wound up taking a family on vacations all over the Midwest and the East. And then internationally, my wife and I at that time traveled to Ireland twice, Czech Republic once, and then on a military mission I went to West Germany, and that's it, more or less. Most of it dealing with either business or the military, and then quite a bit of pleasure.
Okay.
I traveled pretty much to different countries.
Was it work-related travel or?
Work and fun
Okay,
with the family.
okay.
So, sometimes it was 2 or 3 times a month, sometimes it was 2 or 3 times a year.
So you were used to a lot of travel. Anybody else?
We've always enjoyed traveling, did a lot of traveling. And we've done Europe, and we've done cruises, and we've done, we're going to Jamaica in 2 weeks again for the umpteenth time. And so, but when you get on a transplant list, you don't go
Okay.
anywhere.
That's good, and that's why I wanted to start, kind of start there. Lucy, before you got sick, were you vacationer or work? Or?
Just vacational from family to visit, and work related. I went to Denver, Colorado. It wasn't far away.
Okay.
But I went there to accept my award that I won. I won a national award.
Now that's after transplant, right?
Before.
Oh, before. Okay. Okay. Well, let's kind of hold that
Well,
thought.
wait a minute, what's the award for?
For being a great caregiver. I worked in the healthcare field.
Yeah, for you.
And I was nominated and I won.
That's great.
Great.
Right. Before the transplant, we did some traveling, going to Europe, almost every other year or every year, So we did it. But then, like I said, I did it before my transplant, the summer of 2008. But then I got very sickly when I was coming back. I had a blood clot in my leg, and I think it was caused by the problem with my kidney were failing.
Okay.
The creatinine level was getting skyrocketed.
Well, that's maybe a good transition. So
Yeah.
it sounds like most people, as part of their lives, enjoyed the opportunity to vacation or had to travel. But certainly it sounds like a lot of people enjoyed traveling. So now I'm going to put you guys on. So now you got kind of sick and you got a transplant. So now I want you to kind of think back first about we've got somebody here with us that's 3 months post-transplant. So when did you kind of start feeling comfortable to think about, either going on a vacation or going to see family, Jack? And tell us a little bit about kind of, that and that first, how do you take that first step?
I think the first trip I did on a plane post-transplant was to a wedding in Florida.
How soon after your transplant was that?
I'd say it was maybe a year. It wasn't, real soon after, but it was maybe a year about that. And it was kind of, it was kind of a big deal to take that step and, to prepare it. I wore the face mask and the whole deal. And then as time progresses, you get, more accustomed to that.
Do you want to talk, since you kind of launched into kind of planning for your first trip? So did you broach the
10 years ago?
Did you broach the subject with your transplant coordinator?
Yes,
did you? Were you scared? Just how did you do you remember how you because you're a heart transplant recipient for people that came late. So just kind of.
I definitely did talk to the coordinator. She was not a problem. But, you have to have all your pills ready and just, you're easing back into a regular lifestyle. So those first times are kind of big steps. And then one of the first international trips I did post-transplant was to a transplant game in South Africa. And that was, right, Africa was a bigger thing than going to just to London or Paris or something. So I did go to, and it was still kind of early on, So I went to, and through Madison, there's a woman who you can see, I forget her name.
Through the transplant center.
Well, yeah, she's, I think anyone there who's traveling has issues can see her.
Yeah.
The whole thing is, travel and issues related to it. So I would talk to her, and she had, very specific maps of where you could go and not worry about, certain things where you probably shouldn't go, and things you should take with you. So that was all very helpful for a big first trip.
So your transplant coordinator was kind of one of your first stops for information.
Yeah, the transplant coordinator informed me who she was. And again, I have her on my phone, but I don't remember her name.
Okay, well, Merle, how about you? You're a kidney recipient again.
Kidney recipient, and about 6 months after my transplant, I had kind of a rocky post-transplant period, mostly because I couldn't get the new routine down, right? Dealing with your new organ, getting your meds right, doing all the keeping hydrated, eating properly. It took me a while to get good at that. And I had just finally started. By 6 months, I thought I pretty much had it. I called up my transplant coordinator and I said, well, I think I'm ready. It's about time for my annual trip down through the South, where I would go, perhaps stop where I grew up in Louisville, visit some high school friends, which I canceled, go down and see my mother-in-law in Florida, stop and see my brother in North Carolina, and come home. Of course, driving. We make that trip in the spring just about every year. And so we were just going to go ahead and do that. And she said, sure, and we talked it over, and it was mostly spent trying to make sure you would have enough meds to make it there and back with like a week spare, they could just do it, right? And so that's how we set the dates about when I did my med refills. And we're very familiar with the trip, staying with relatives the whole time. It was reasonably safe. And it worked out reasonably well, but there were still things about my routine I didn't quite have down yet, like some of the side effects of my medication, right? I was not, when you travel, you don't eat the way you normally eat. And probably half of the medications I take cause constipation. And I managed to control that until I got on the road. And then, oh my. So that was kind of a problem just before I got back. Other than that, I think that trip went pretty okay. My wife drove a lot more than I normally do, or than she normally does, because I actually would get kind of tired sitting up there, which surprised me. But that trip went kind of okay. And then about a year after my transplant, I was called upon to do my first business trip. Again, I used to travel a lot for business, going to one facility or another. And this was to Burlington, Vermont in October, so just about exactly a year after the transplant. And that went okay, right? Kind of funny story about TSA. TSA was new then, right? So the guy's patting me down at the airport as I'm coming in to, not Burlington, I forget where, anyway, when I'm arriving. And he's patting me down, he sees this big globby fistula on my arm, and he thought I had a weapon sewn under my skin. And so I had to pull up my sleeve and show it to him and explain what it was and how it works, let him put his hand around it and feel it go. But we got through that. And then going to the business meeting, one of the big struggles I had early on was drinking enough water, right? Pre-transplant, you're told don't drink anything, right? Now you got to drink like crazy. Well, I was pretty good at that until I got into these day-long business meetings in a remote site, where you're in a room kind of like this, with a number of people kind of like that, a bunch of water things up there, and a bathroom somewhere down that hall, and I have no idea where it really is. And so all of a sudden I stopped drinking. Well, 2 days into the, and then you go out to dinner and all this other, 2 days into the meeting, I'm sitting here by my computer with the meeting, just kind of like this, and I just keel over on the floor. I'm dehydrated. And so they hauled me off to an urgent care place nearby, which luckily I was wearing my bracelet, which I don't have one right now because it's broken. I didn't fix it. But I was wearing my bracelet. They took one look at that and said, "We're not going to touch this guy." And so the guy who drove me there kindly took me all the way across town to where there was a transplant hospital. And they just kept me all day. All they really did was rehydrate me, but they gave me like every test in the book, right? And the next day I was back up and running. I made the last day of the meeting, got home just fine, right? I don't think I missed a thing. It was usually the case with those meetings.
Right.
And then since then, it's been I did a couple more business meetings after that before I retired. They all went without a hitch. And I still do the national travel to see family once or twice a year. And they've gotten a little more far-flung over the years. But it all works pretty good, but you gotta prepare, right?
Well, let's hold that thought because I want to get more into preparations. But John, I'm gonna kick on you. That first time you kind of tiptoed into the travel waters after transplant, because you're a heart transplant recipient, so.
Well, it wasn't tiptoeing. I mean, I was used to going to Virginia and New York City and Portland, Oregon to see my family, my kids and my grandkids. And when I originally had the transplant, I was told I should probably expect about 5 years. And so I wasn't going to sit around and not go see my kids and my grandkids. So I started right away. I mean, it wasn't like the next day or anything like that, but it was like, I'm not going to stop doing this because they're my family and I want to go see them. And it was probably 8-9 years before I did anything bigger than that. So it was still like once or twice a year, domestic travel, mostly flying, sometimes driving, but nothing really big. And my preparation was pretty much, what am I doing at home? Okay, I have to take all that stuff along to make sure I can do it there. But I wouldn't have checked out where's the nearest transplant hospital in Fairfax County, Virginia. It just wouldn't have occurred to me.
Oh.
Well, it didn't occur to me either, but it occurred to my wife. She called.
Okay, well, let's hold that thought and just see if anybody else wants to talk about. So you just jumped into camping, which probably has, to me, bugs and dirt and a different kind of, probably not TSA.
Because we were tenting.
Can you think about those early days? Because now you're 30, almost 30 years out. So that's the other thing. So kind of think about not the same medicines, not the same thing that many of you recently maybe have experienced.
I just recently went on the new meds. I was still on the old meds till about 5 years ago. But
so what was the philosophy even of the transplant center? Because it was all organized.
We didn't have transplant coordinators. That's fairly new for me. You just were assigned a group of nurses that I called and said, okay, just make sure you know where a hospital is and take your meds, and they gave me a travel letter, which I get every year. I just asked for one for this year, as a matter of fact. And that lists all your meds you're taking, your latest lab levels, and who to contact if you land in a hospital.
Okay, we'll talk more about that. I saw a few people writing down, but how about you, Chad? You're you got a family, you're a liver recipient.
Yeah, I would say we really don't travel that much, but now we're actually traveling more because actually I'm going to Miami next week, or Tampa next week, because my son is a national ranked kicker for high school right now. So I would say probably 2.5 years after transplant is when we first flew.
Anybody else want to just share that first?
I think our first trip was, 6 months?
Yeah, it's 7 months after.
7 months after.
He's a liver recipient.
Yeah, liver. And
did it just work out that way, or was there hesitation? Did it just work out to be 6 months or?
I was going crazy. It was, and I said, I am going to our friends to visit our friends in Florida. And John's like, wait, I'm coming with you. So, but the second trip, we didn't have enough meds almost because you can't depend on the airlines.
Yeah.
So let's hold that. Let's just hear first trips, but that's a good, another good.
Yeah.
Your first trip.
First trip was in June. I have a daughter that she lives in Missoula, Montana. So my brother is retired roofer. So so my daughter says, well, I need a roof. So anyway, so I mean, I'm not a roofer. I went there just for a ride, you know, really.
Just improvise.
So my two
did the
brothers,
tear
you
off?
know, they came along. Yeah, and so we drove. I mean, it was 24 hours traveling, you know. So we stayed overnight in about Eden, which is between South Dakota and
So did you drive because you were a little bit reluctant to fly after transplant that first trip?
Yeah, I was not really. I felt good, you know. Really, in fairness, I mean, my wife gave me life, you know. Really, she gave me life because I was dying. So the fact is that I feel very reluctant in many ways to adventure because I felt good, you know. Really, I did. And that's my first trip in June.
Okay.
June 2nd.
Hold that thought. Do you remember where you first went? Was it to?
I traveled 1 year after my transplants. I traveled with the research team at the Medical College of Wisconsin. We were just there last month in December. This has been my third time going with them.
Okay.
I'm a patient advisor for
Okay.
their team.
And Lucy, for some of you that came late, is
I'm heart and kidney
heart and
transplant.
kidney transplant recipient. And how many years out are you?
4.
4. Okay, so we kind of heard yes. Go ahead.
Mine was kind of unique because I had to spend 17 weeks in the hospital and in rehab. So by the time I was finally released, I had to retrain my whole body from top to bottom. The biggest thing was learning how to walk and learn endurance. And fortunately, my wife was a big help, and I'm continuing to improve my ability just going up and down stairs. The first time I did it, I only did 3. And now I can do 3, 4 flights going down or even coming up. So there was a lot of muscle mass I had to regain to be able to even want to travel. I was never reluctant to travel. My wife said, no, we gotta take it easy because you don't want to catch a cold, get pneumonia, or catch the flu. So we stayed in last winter, totally. So I didn't even start traveling till almost a year, 15 months post-transplant. And our first one we did, the biggest thing she got me to do was 2 things. One, I had to know my medications and be able to do it myself. She took all the medication off the table, threw it on the bed, said, okay,
Sort of.
reorganize it for me. So I did, and it did the first time. And the other thing she did was that, okay, I got to the point where I had to do my stats, you know, your blood pressure, your weight, your temperature, all that stuff, which I have to do as a lung transplant daily, and have to do it all on my own and make sure I get it done. So she's weaned me from being totally dependent on her managing my medications and other things I need to do to be independent, self-supportive, to where, like last November, I was able to go out on my own on a weekend retreat by myself for 3 days. So.
Good. Let's talk about some of the preparation stuff. I mean, Sue, you talked about travel letter, and I saw a few people like grab sheets of paper like they've never heard about that. So maybe let's talk about some of the preparations in terms of whether it's traveling to Minneapolis or traveling to Los Angeles or traveling. Jack was just in Rome last week. So maybe let's talk about some of the preparations and some of the things. I know, John, you had kind of a good list, so if we forget anything, but besides, so medications like insurance, transplant centers, I mean, you're kind of a seasoned person, but can you talk like what is in a travel letter, and then maybe if anyone else kind of does that, and then other things that they do in terms of either coordination with your transplant coordinator, your transplant center, or other stuff. But maybe can you just start with what's in a travel letter, and how did you find out about it, and if I don't know about it, what should I do?
They made me take one the first time we went somewhere, and it basically lists your name, when you had the transplant, what kind of transplant, the date, your doctor's name, the hospital name and address and phone number, who to contact in case something happens, all your meds, your lab results for the past month or the last time you went, and if it's pretty steady, your lab results, and that's pretty much it. And where to, like I said, where to call in case you land in a hospital somewhere if something goes on. So.
Okay, anybody else? Do you have a travel letter or anything like
I did
that?
experience. I just went through Dr. Cronin at Frederick. He was my transplant doctor, you know. So basically, it's what she said. That's what he did to me, you know. And he says, well, if you go, I was going to Italy, so he gave me a hospital right in Palermo, which is the American hospital, which they do a lot of transplants, you know. So if anything would occur, I was able to go somewhere, and he gave me the names of the surgeons out there, you know. So I was very happy about it. I think it really it's worked.
So how about you, Jack? What do you do? Because you're all over. How do you kind of either?
I feel like I missed the boat. I never heard about it.
I just emailed my coordinator, and she hasn't gotten back.
Yeah, I'm gonna ask her now. What hospital?
Freighter. But like I said, I just emailed her the other day, and she hasn't answered me back, so maybe they don't do it anymore. Last year I had a different coordinator.
Does anybody, have you guys heard? You guys are more recent recipients. Have you heard about a travel letter?
Yeah, we received a travel letter the first time we went.
Did you ask about it, or did your transplant coordinator just kind of bring it up? Like,
I don't remember how it came about, but we just kept that with us because it had the list of meds, and we were still kind of new at trying to figure all that stuff out.
Right.
Yeah. So it was helpful. Yeah. I wouldn't have thought to ask for it again before we go again.
So it probably should be current, especially I would assume, I mean, you probably don't do your labs very often now, do you?
Every other month.
Okay, so.
It just changed. It was once a month.
Okay.
But I get a new one every year.
So maybe that brings up medication. So how do you guys deal with medications? Because I've got a couple interesting questions. So traveling and medications, and especially, so let's just kind of, I'm going to go to the three of you first, and then maybe others can talk about that. But especially if you're, I mean, it's one thing if you're going to go in your car, I think that maybe, but let's talk about if you're getting on an airplane, you're going on a cruise. But Jack, can you talk about just how do you handle medications, and maybe if you're comfortable sharing, like, do you go pick up your medications? Are they mail ordered to you? Because one of the questions I got from someone not able to attend tonight, I'd like to share, but his question was about mail order medications, but he was going to be gone when they were going to arrive at home. But first of all, back to you, Jack. Can you just talk like medications?
Well, I'm at that part I'm very prepared about other, and I always take enough for, you know, a couple extra weeks really, just in case something happens or if I want to extend. And you can get an override so that you can get more medication, like about it. A year ago, I had 2 trips that were both pretty close to each other, and it wound up not making any sense to come home. So I was gone for 2 months, which is a lot of meds to have to, you know, have in advance, but you can do it. sometimes it takes a few extra phone calls, and I get my meds depending on what year and who I'm getting them from. Sometimes I'm getting them from multiple sources, so to coordinate that is, the main battle. But
And could you just talk about
I wouldn't leave without having.
But when you say you
sufficient-
take them with you, can you just talk physically?
Yeah,
Do you
I
take them
always-
all in the overhead bin, or
Yeah,
what do you
definitely
do?
all with me. You
Like
would
physically?
Yeah, you would never check your meds.
So you never check your
No, and
medicines?
I don't think anyone, you just shouldn't check.
Okay.
your meds.
Let's,
I
Merle?
travel mostly by car, right, so it's pretty easy. And I use, basically the way I've always done. The only way to keep my meds separate, since you use little pill boxes, and so I've got all my stuff laid out for a month in advance before I leave. And it's all just packed up, easy to handle, and it goes in the car rather than the trunk, because we're very often traveling in the summertime. So it stays air conditioned, and either my wife or I will carry it into the restaurant when we go in, so it doesn't stay in the car and get hot. Just because
So-
some of them are temperature sensitive.
Yeah, I want to make that point because it's important to know kind of the storage of your medication. So let's say you have a liquid or it's an eye drop or whatever. So it's important not just to have them and to keep them safe, but also you really do have to know about storage, if that makes sense. And like, can it be exposed to light? Can it be exposed to heat? Because even if you're stuck on an airplane, but then there's no air conditioning, that kind of thing. So John, how about you and medications?
Well, since I heard that no one would ever be stupid enough to check a bag with meds, I have nothing to say.
Anybody else have
I have a
medication?
question. In these handouts, you said, or somebody said, keep your meds in the original bottles. So you have to go through security, they can check that. Well, obviously, since we're home, we have a little pill box and all that. So are you recommending we actually take a bottle of each of those and pack? Okay. I can see if you go through security, they'll say, what's this? Well, that's what it is, but okay.
Yeah, normally that's what I do, I take the bottles, and I have no problem, go through security, they look at it, they know what it is, And then a lot of time I have that ladder too with me, that thing helps a lot, The traveling ladder, it does help.
Yeah, she gets a whole conveyor line going. Tuesday AM, Tuesday PM, Wednesday AM, Wednesday PM, and she'll label little Ziplocs. She'll pull out all the pills and she dumps in every bag, and then it all goes in one container, and then that goes in the car, and we leave. She does I've watched her do it. It's crazy.
So hold on, say that again. How do you do that?
We go to a trailer, so I get those little Ziploc, and I have AM and PM because that's what I do my pills. So all my AM pills go in one, all my PM pills go in another, and then when I need to take them, I just pull out the AM or pull out the PM.
She's like, so she has 2 for each day.
And then I take like 3 extra days worth, just in case.
So, like, we take these big pill bottles the pills are, like, some of them are really tiny.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like, it just takes up a lot of space.
Yes, it does.
You're still thinking that we should just take the
Sometimes-
original.
Depending on the length of the trip, sometimes because, I'm always fighting for space in my luggage. So sometimes I will take them out, put them in a Ziploc, but I'll peel the label off of my pill bottle and put it on the Ziploc.
Oh, okay.
So that if there would be, I've never been questioned, but
Yeah.
it could happen.
Theoretically,
Yeah.
I have read that you're supposed to do that no matter where you go, whether it's domestic or international, but I have always just kept them packed in the boxes that I use to keep them straight in my head. So I take them right. And I figure, look, I can show you all of my medical records on my phone, right? If you really have a problem with that, I can identify them all. I can show you the prescription records at UW. It's all there. So if you got a problem, just sit for a minute, give me Wi-Fi, and I'll explain it to you.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So do you, John, you don't want to talk about your medicine. Anybody else want to talk about,
I take my meds with me, different pill cassettes. I got them all from Cindy when we used to do the in-services. Because they were free, that pharmaceutical that used to come in.
You can get bigger.
Right.
Pill
And they would pass pill containers out to us if we wanted them. So I take them with me and I keep them with me. I don't check my medication. I keep it with me on the plane.
So a gentleman called today, and the one other thing I mentioned to him is all transplant centers do have a transplant pharmacist. So even though maybe you personally haven't seen that person, but just that you might be, so if you're not sure, even about transit of medication or, like storage, we're gonna be taking a hiking trip in Iceland. You can always, you can always ask to talk, but you should know who the name of the transplant pharmacist. So maybe even though you're filling your prescriptions in another way, just know that on every transplant center, whether it's Freighter, Madison, Aurora, Mayo, wherever, all have transplant pharmacists. So you can always, if you're not sure, like, oh, now my eye doctor is giving me eye drops for my cataracts or my glaucoma. So also think about the other medicines maybe you're taking short term. So just kind of, but that's another resource I think people don't maybe realize because maybe they don't even see that person. What other things in terms of other planning, those of you especially that are traveling a distance, do you always check out so you were lucky and your transplant surgeon told you about the transplant hospital
Yes.
he would want you to go to.
Yes.
But like Jack, do you ahead of time or do you just hope someone will get you to somewhere?
I have a lot of faith. No.
Do you go with a group of friends or family?
I travel alone a lot, but often meeting people or visiting people. And I do go to I go to the transplant games, the U.S. ones and the world ones. And at the world ones, they'll always send out an email reminding you to pack your medication. And apparently, at every transplant game so far, at the world ones, someone has arrived without their medication.
Wow.
Oh my
Which
goodness.
seems absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah.
But
Isn't that right?
apparently, yeah.
Scary.
So there's always going to be a safety valve.
But you don't, so how about travel insurance or emergency evac? Because we have a story from someone that went to Israel. He's a recipient, he lives in Illinois, who wrote me, it's kind of a horror story, but basically he had to extract himself from a country. So do any of you kind of think about, or have you talked with your transplant coordinators, especially those it's one thing if you're in the US or Merle, you talked about going across town in Burlington, but do some of you kind of plan ahead also beyond medications in terms of you're going to a city or a part in the state and you're not even familiar? Do you even peek where the transplant center is? Do you ask your transplant? Go for it.
I had lunch with a fellow today, and they traveled extensively around the world all the time. And he said, if you get stuck in a country and you go down, you got to get home. Through ARP, I can't remember the exact name of it, but it was like Jet Evac or something. And for $250 a year for you and your spouse, partner, whatever, if you need to get home, they'll fly you home from wherever you are. And so I'm going to look into that because, we're going to be in Switzerland next year, or this year, yes. And it's nice to go home.
But we bought the travel insurance for that.
Hmm?
We bought the travel insurance for that.
We bought the travel insurance.
No, but I think you bring up an interesting thing. If you haven't looked, and I'm not selling AARP membership, but they have amazing resources. So besides asking your transplant center, so they just have some amazing organizing resources, but the travel part of AAA is something that you might really wanna, besides starting your car and changing your flat tire, there are some resources there. So maybe that does bring up resources. Are there apps? Are there some things just in terms of, so I was asking about you like look, you know, even Google, like where is the closest transplant hospital? I mean, what resources do you use just personally to either organize or use as a backup? Like, do you, besides not planning your trip or what hotel to go to or Airbnb, I'm talking about related to your health, etc. Anybody use any things they want to share?
That first time I went to South Africa, I did take out an insurance that wasn't terribly expensive, so that if you needed, let's say, to get blood, this insurance covered that you would be flown if necessary to a place where the blood transfusion would be a safe place to get it. And you know, since then, because I travel quite a bit, I've gotten kind of lax on that, so I don't always take the travel insurance. Depending, if you book your ticket through American Express, which I try to do, there's some built-in benefits with that for insurance. But I think in general that travel insurance is not terribly expensive, so it's just kind of laziness that I don't do it. And it's probably a good idea.
Any other resources?
Well, since Cecilia, another volunteer at the Kidney Foundation, I was talking to her yesterday, and she said she always checks with her health insurance to make sure that they would cover like a Medivac or something like that. So it's probably important also.
So checking with the health insurance. She also was sharing, her son is a recipient, and she was sharing, and their insurance requires mail order medications for his immunosuppression, and they travel, and she was one that was, when this gentleman called, she was in our office and kind of overheard the conversation, and she was saying how she just calls the company, the insurance company, and then arranges early delivery to their home. So they're going like for Ireland, I think for 3 weeks, but evidently the delivery date for his immunosuppression at their home address. So any other resources people do use?
Another thing on the mail order pharmacies. One of the trips we made to Florida, since I've had my transplant, my mother-in-law was very ill and we weren't sure how long we were going to be down there. I had tried to arrange my meds so that all my meds are from Walgreens because you can get them everywhere, right? But they couldn't work out in the building with my immunosuppressants because they're Part B and everything else is Part D, and they come through. So I ended up getting my Part B stuff from UW Health as mail order. But I talked to them before that, and they say that you just tell them every month where you want it shipped, and they're going to ship it there. And that's what they do. Every month they call me up and say, hey, it's time for you to renew. I said, no, you guys are early again. But that's all right. In a week, I'll call you back and tell you to ship it to Florida. And it's okay. So.
Yeah, we use the mail order through Freight Alert, and every month they ask, where you want it.
John, were there other things on that list you had in terms of some of the other items before we move on? Because we kind of jumped all over, but I know there was insurance.
Well, it's not just related to transplant, but it's keeping others informed. Like having a home base, having where you're going, they need to know like your itinerary and the same kind of contact information is probably like the travel letter information. Somebody else needs to have that besides you. So that kind of thing. So, and I just like this, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I keep mine in the car. I
Well, you're
make
driving.
copies of them and I keep it in the car and one in the trailer and one at home. So I have them everywhere.
But you're saying kind of somebody else on the home front, or, you know,
So like I should
friend
go
or
around.
neighbor, you know, in terms of where you are. It's kind of like a copy of your passport, you know.
Yeah.
I leave one at my office just in case it's stolen. You know, some of those basic travel things, I guess, in terms of just not good things that might happen to you, not just related to your health, but.
One of the things that, when you were talking about apps, it's like the flip side of that I have on here, and it goes back to Merle and being able to explain his myths by getting Wi-Fi at TSA. So I've had situations where I had no batteries and no cell phone access and no Wi-Fi. And what do? So you can't call my sister here, who's my home base, and say, you know, can you please talk to so-and-so for me, because I can't call her. And I can't sit down at a computer because I'm on a train in the middle of Pennsylvania. So, you know, you have to think about those things too. You can't just rely on your normal means of communication because it's not necessarily going to be there.
We didn't really talk about vaccinations, but again, you just refer Jack to your transplant coordinator. So if you're got invited to
One of those places you weren't supposed to go in South Africa.
do you, but the transplant coordinator could be a resource for you, I guess, in terms of travel. And then I assume, I'm gonna pick on lung recipients here. There are certain states you're not supposed to go to, even in the United States, if that, you've been kind of told that? Did that kind of come up after transplant? Did you kind of just read about that from Dr. Oz?
We've heard that through other support, through other recipients.
Yeah.
But we haven't been told that by the team. We're told to avoid Arizona because of the dust.
So I think the rule, I think the moral of that story is, I didn't mean to pick on you a little bit, is that there are things you might not think about just because it's in the US. You might not think about that, but again, I think good communication with your transplant coordinator will also help. I mean, you were lucky, but I helped organize the transplant games when they were here in Wisconsin, and you know, as it related to other states putting in bids to host them in the future, the organizing committee had to look at, you know, Arizona could never put in a bid because many of the recipients coming were transplant recipients. So sometimes we learn things because we're lucky enough to run into people or participate in, let's say, an evening like this. But I would say just really, especially those of you who are newer to transplant, just the transplant coordinator probably is there's like probably no dumb question. I think when I speak, and I'm not a transplant coordinator, but I would say it doesn't matter. If nothing else, just call them. Do you see what I mean? And there's really, because you don't even realize, but in the dust and sand, there are certain spores that, depending again on the type of transplant, are just not good for you, and you're never gonna see it coming.
Especially like for me, I only got one lung, so I've got to be extra careful. I still have my other lung, but it's not providing anything. It's just taking up space.
I just want to bring up construction sites. I'm even far out, and I ended up with the bacterial pneumonia in last January because they were tearing down our parking structure at work. And I got one of the spores in, so that's even with both pneumonia shots. So even amongst around here, if they're doing construction, wear a mask.
Can we talk about water? And
Yes,
I'm just
please.
wondering what people when you travel out of the country. So we're going to Jamaica in a couple months. I'm really excited because we haven't gone out of the country in years. And I know that the water in Jamaica is potable. We always drank it and didn't have to worry. Do we have to worry about it with John, because he is immunosuppressed and
My coordinator always said, make sure you just drink bottled water.
Yeah.
really?
I think this printout from the National Kidney Foundation says something about that too.
That's all she ever drinks.
It says ask the locals if the water's safe to drink, and
You don't want to ask locals
I know
anything in
That ain't gonna
Jamaica.
tell you.
I know I've been warned off of well water.
that's the other thing, right?
Unless
Yeah,
unless I have a certificate that's been inspected recently. They
really,
were defined recently.
yeah.
But we spent a lot of time at my mother-in-law's house. We travel Florida, and that's all gone out there. She was out in the middle of nowhere.
Sure.
And we bother her to get it inspected every year, and she does. So that I feel okay.
I drink regular water if I'm in a country where the water is good, or in a city where the water is good. There are places I go to where everyone only drinks bottled water.
Okay.
So then, of course, I only drink bottled water.
Mhm.
So I gauge it on
Yeah.
the place.
Okay.
I don't know if that's a good idea though.
Bottled water.
I mean, I thought one of the things with water, like, in Mexico or whatever, is that there are bacteria that your body has never been exposed to.
Right.
So, it might be perfectly fine for locals because their body's been
It's
exposed.
kind of like the same thing eating off of a food truck. While it might seem cool, the sanitation might be different. You see what I mean? Of the cool taco truck on the streets of Port-au-Prince. And it might look like a lot of people are eating there, but I think even, eating things that's an interesting point in terms of eating when you're traveling, like the types of restaurants you go to. You might have to rethink, even though it looks cool, or you are an Anthony, is it Boydeen, who discovered things in, alleys of interesting cuisine. So again, I don't know if transplant coordinators told you stuff, or
It's best to be careful.
Only eat in the tourist traps.
Yeah, I wind up going to my cousin and her husband, who has an office in Shanghai, take me over there a lot. And my cousin is also immunosuppressed from some cancer stuff. So we eat a lot in very westernized, more hotel-related restaurants in a place like that. And certainly only drink bottled water.
Talking about food and water, one of the things when we travel by car, if we're going to be traveling a distance of time, we actually have a hotel room kitchen bag that we keep in the car. And it's got paper plates and utensils and tons of things to help clean up the apartment. And we always plan the trip, so we get a little time to just go to the grocery store, pick up something we can put together in the microwave, and that's primarily what we eat while we're driving. Just because it takes all the question mark out of it. Pretty much know what we've got.
Okay, well, is there anything in the general category that you wish you would have known, but you didn't know, that now you just kind of like to pass on in terms of a situation or something like I wish I would have known about, and now you want to at least share anything we haven't kind of covered tonight?
Well, I can answer the check bags question. So I always thought it would be a problem trying to carry on meds because you get a question and have to explain things and have all the scientific names and things like that. So I always checked bags until we got delayed and had to change flights. And my bag was like 2 days later than I was. And so, you can't, a trusting soul. I thought the airlines can be trusted to get you there on time or to have a process for if it's not working right, but you can't count on it. So you have to, prepare yourself and split them up or carry them with you and, hold your arms around them. I don't know what.
But John, you had your meds with you though, right?
I had them checked on the airline.
Yeah, I don't
You
like that.
did? What?
He's already confessed.
Right.
So,
John.
I guess what happens
I
in
tried to explain there was a good reason.
Right.
That's why we had to pass on him before. Lucy.
Right,
So,
okay.
Anybody else feeling in the confessional mood? Like, I
Oh,
wish
boy.
I would have, wish I would have known that.
Always keep your money and your meds close at hand.
Okay. And we talked a little bit about resources. Are there any other burning questions people have before I'm going to put you all on the spot with kind of the last question that hopefully is more positive? But any other questions like why did you come in tonight? Was there something else that you wanted to either ask or get some information about or see how other people are dealing with it? Was there any?
I had a question. What I was worried about is on a long flight, you're stuck in a seat. You want to move around. So do you move around?
I try to get up and go to the bathroom just for the walk, even if I don't have to go to the bathroom. So it is a good idea. Prior to my transplant, I was I took a trip to I had planned with some friends, and I went to Argentina, and the whole thing was kind of working out poorly. It was in the winter weather here, and our connecting flight got canceled, so we rented a car and drove to Atlanta. So I was stuck in the back seat of the last little rental car we could get, drove to Atlanta, then got on the flight. So when I came back, this was when I was starting to have troubles. I got a blood clot from that. So then I didn't get listed for a transplant as soon as I would have, because they couldn't tell it was the blood clot that was going to clear up, or if I in fact really needed a transplant, which I most in fact did. So yeah, it's the long flight is definitely something that's not good for anyone. You should probably wear
Yeah, I know a lot of recipients that do get the compression.
That's what I wear all the
socks.
time when I travel. Yeah, I do.
It's a good idea.
And then I get up a lot too,
Yeah, you should try to
get up a lot.
Chris does something that I think is great. When we take a flight, she gets by our seats first, and she has these sandy wipes. Anything you could possibly touch or even look at, she goes down, everything. And so that thing is very sanitary, because everybody and their brothers touched it before you get there.
That's such a good idea.
And that,
I think I saw somebody had.
I thought that was a great thing to do.
Well, I actually because the Clorox wipes, they're not bleach. I get the bleach wipes, and I have gloves, and so I use that and don't touch anything for 5 minutes, and then because I'm just really worried about it. That would ruin everything if you got C. diff or something.
People come off of that plane and then they're going on the plane. They haven't had time to do much of anything. So that's really good.
Yeah, I mean, here's my tip. I do that even now at these Marcus Cinema seats where you're sitting and you're now having to pretend you're on a couch with someone you've never met because of the way they've organized the seats. So quite frankly, even though I am not a recipient, I've been doing just the handles myself. So again, to our point about travel and your point, Sue, about even locally, I just kind of even think about those kinds of things, but I've been translating a few of those into my own, because it just irritates, I never see them cleaning the movie theaters, and so.
Cart wipes at the grocery store?
Yeah, so anyway, just as we think about that, but any other questions before we kind of try to wrap up a bit? And
So the only other question I have, it's not related to travel or anything, but, and it's been a burning question, I've been asking my wife this all the time, is with all the recipients that we have in this room, what is your feeling on the straw issue?
Straw.
With all the
Oh,
restaurants
straws.
taking away the straws?
No, I'd want a straw. I don't even,
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm
in
not a
terms
recipient.
of
No,
the
give me a straw.
sanitation of their glasses and
Well,
dishware.
because most of the restaurants and bars now
Yes,
are
yes.
getting away from the straws.
But what you're saying is now I'm forced to drink out of that.
And we're told
When they
that,
take them like this.
and we're
yes,
told
I
that-
hate that.
Yeah, the guy takes them.
and we're
yeah.
told as recipients never to drink out of a glass, use a straw.
I haven't faced that yet, but it's been explained to me by my wife that just means I don't drink there.
There are straws and they're eco-friendly straws
Yeah,
that I'm
that's-
seeing people start to order and just have, and
Yeah.
then just kind of have it in their
Yeah.
purse or
Carry
their
yourself.
bag. But they're eco-friendly, so you are not killing a seagull. But just now have taken to starting to do those. But those are available and they so you can feel comfortable because, we want to also save our planet. So, but you also want to be safe and responsible for yourself.
Just as a bigger risk as a.
Yeah, when the guy in the dishwasher does his hair and then does the plates, yeah, so.
So what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Well, right.
You get the plate from. Anyway.
I think be vigilant, like I've actually refused some, dishes
Oh, yeah.
or silverware. So I think, I don't know that there's an easy answer, but even myself, because I hang out with recipients all the time, I'm hyper vigilant too.
Well, just like with a lot of this stuff, it's good to think about it. To know that there's a possibility and to think about the pros and cons and make your own decision with some good advice.
And I think these are the kinds of things to, even though it might be a fleeting comment tonight, make a list, and this is the next thing when you go for either lab work or a follow-up visit. Does that make sense? So, you know how they say when you're gonna maximize your time with your physician or your nurse, sometimes you might think about it tonight, but your visit isn't for 2 more weeks. So I hope you keep a running list of these kinds of things, because they'll say, oh, are there any concerns today you wanna talk to Dr. So-and-so about? And most of the time, if you're feeling okay, or maybe you have a little
Don't wanna
sniffle,
bother.
but the straws is never gonna come up. The dishes is never gonna come up. The fact is, when can I go to a buffet? Is it okay for me to eat at a Chinese buffet at the place on Blue Mountain? Do you see what I mean? But sometimes you don't even think about those things. So I think maybe whether, it's just a good thing to keep like a little running list, and then you can decide how you want to use that 15 minutes, that 30 minutes, or whatever, you know what I mean, and fill up the time and get your money's worth.
And to emphasize the question about asking your transplant coordinator, in a couple earlier programs that we had here, the coordinator said, don't worry about asking any type of question that you don't feel that's right to ask.
And remember my chart or whatever electronic record, you have the ability to email in a question. So tonight, if you have that question, you could, if you're one that uses, a computer and uses my chart to either make an appointment or ask a question, this is a question perfect to send in an email. Like, I was just at this program and I'm kind of wondering about travel letters, and just send off the email tonight or tomorrow, even though your trip might be in 3 months. Like what's our centers, can I get one? Or what about straws? You know what I mean? So this is the kind of thing that you can just send in even with my chart using a resource. So kind of the last thing that was on my mind, I would like to end with positive things, just in terms of either someplace you've been or someplace that you've heard about that would be good, but we can just kind of go around and I recommend that you consider visiting where? So Jack, how about you?
Anywhere you want to go, but just be careful. Check it out.
But is there a country, a city, or something that you just like to say, think about this place, that brings a smile to your face? Anywhere?
I like Shanghai.
Okay. Merle?
I tend to go to the same places all the time, mostly for the family, but if I think back, probably the place I've enjoyed visiting the most has been, oddly enough, Philadelphia. You can get your history fix there if you want. It's kind of like New York City, but a little more laid back. They've got all the arts and culture and things to do, but you just don't have the numbers of people in the evenings. Most of them commute away from the city and don't live there. And you got a lot of universities there. And so it tends to make it a very comfortable place to just walk around and do things.
John?
One of the reasons that I don't talk to people very much is because that's like a opening line. Like, have you been doing any traveling? And I usually haven't, and they usually have. So I don't like to talk about my traveling, because if I say what I think was the best place I've ever been, everybody's going to say, yeah, I was there like 5 times. I like New Orleans because it's different than any place I've ever been.
I bet it is.
I can't really contribute. I haven't really been anywhere.
How about in Wisconsin?
The Dells, where we have our trailer.
My favorite place on earth is Eagle River. I love it up there. I'd love to retire and live up there.
Fresh air.
On a lake.
What about Eagle River?
It's just quiet. It's wooded. You got the national forest right there, or the state forest right there, and it's just relaxation for me.
Yeah, I just got back from Los Angeles, you know. During that time, they had fires out there. And really, the only place that I really love it was Gary Museum, you know. That's a very, the guy, he spent millions of dollars. That place is fantastic. It's beautiful, you know. But everything else, I says, geez, I think I'd like to go back to Wisconsin. In all fairness, you know.
All right. How about you, Chad?
I would say pretty much, well, the only place we really don't much travel for kicking competitions, and that is Florida. So I would say Florida.
We have a hideaway in northern Wisconsin. We have a home on a lake up there, and that's just the ultimate peaceful. Don't come. We like it.
Did you notice he's not telling us where he is?
But a couple years ago, we rented a villa in Tuscany, and it was phenomenal. So I would highly recommend Italy or Scandinavia. Beautiful, just beautiful.
Yeah. All right, how about you, Lucy?
I like visiting Alexandria, Virginia, where my son and his family live. It's just nice, clean, and peaceful.
Shows they have about.
How about you?
Oh yeah, there's a lot.
When we were in Italy, we were in Rome for a few days, and we hired a travel guide, and she said that all of the public drinking fountains are safe to drink because they test the water every week, and they're like, I just think that's awesome. Yeah.
So, how about you? Where would you recommend?
Well, because we've had to stay within 2 hours of Freighter, we did take a vacation. We went to Lake Geneva for 5 nights. It was very nice. That was our first vacation.
That's great.
Yeah.
However, one of your favorites is Mackinac Island.
Mackinac Island is like ultimate.
Yeah.
No horses, no cars,
Nice.
nothing but horse travel for
Watch where you step.
How about you?
I've been to a lot of places. A lot of them are very nice. I'd like to go back. So I will say, when this last incident started, I was on a trip in Ireland, and I got sick there. And I spent 11 days in the hospital there. Seeing what that in the hospital was like.
You need a do-over.
Yes.
But prior to that, we went, and one of the places we went to was some wines. So I guess I can't kiss them.
No.
But it was really hard to get to the barns.
Yes.
Go up all these bizarre steps, and then some of the books.
Yeah, you have to hang upside down or something.
It's very weird.
Oh my God.
Well, I want
Do that anyway.
Thank you all for coming. I hope it was an interesting session. Next month, we won't meet in this teeny weeny little room, so we'll be, oh, we're still on the second floor? Okay, so, and is it a bigger room, Chad? Okay.
Host 30.
Okay, and next month we are, it will be more of a clinical approach, but since it's Heart Month, we'll be talking just overall about cardiac health, and we have a physician joining us from UW-Madison in their transplant program. So, and that program will also, we hopefully will then be able to use our online, we'll be able to stream it. So if you're not able to join us in person, you can listen. Our March program, because March is kind of nutrition month, we're working on kind of the battle of the transplant centers in terms of maybe a different look at some fun eating kinds of things. And so I think those of you that got the letter in the mail, the dates were on that kind of the second side, if that makes sense. So we're the second Tuesday of the month all the way through May. And again, we should be live streaming all those, and thanks to John and Merle. But I want to just thank you all for coming. Chad, thank you for the snacks tonight. We really appreciate it. And hopefully, if you didn't pick up stuff, if you don't have a medical alert bracelet, which is provided by the National Kidney Foundation, or necklace, we have forms. We provide those free of charge. And for those of you that hopefully will come to Spotlight on Life or perhaps watch it, we will have Aurora